Hi everyone. This is a quick PowerPoint lecture just to go over some of the key points of classification and division. This is all geared towards this third essay that you are currently working on. So what makes a good classification division essay? I think the first thing to keep in mind is that classification and division is something that you're already quite familiar with. Imagine this scenario. It's your Aunt Sally's birthday and you are being sent to Wegmans or Tops, and you have very limited amount of time, but you know you need to get some milk, you need to get a cake, you need to pick up some potato chips and maybe some paper plates. Thank goodness grocery stores are organized using classification and division, because you know, oh, I need a cake, I will go to the bakery section, or I need milk, I will go to the dairy section. And so grocery stores, they take this large class, right, of food or grocery items, and then the grocery store divides them up into like categories. And so that's the division aspect, and it really does save time. You could also think about the last time you've gone into some place like Fridays or Applebee's, any kind of restaurant, and think about that menu. That menu is also designed using classification and division. So when you sit down and the first thing you normally see is maybe appetizers, salads. From there, there's often soup. Then it moves on to sandwiches until we get to full course meals. And then normally at the end, we find desserts. That's because, again, you know that if you're in the mood for, say, mozzarella sticks or chicken fingers, you're likely to find them in the appetizer section, and so it saves you time. The menu then takes all of these divisions of food items and it arranges it largely chronologically. And so that gives you a logic for how that menu is put together. So classification and division is very similar. Now, anytime you sit down to write a paper, you always want to have in mind, what is your topic, who is your audience, and what is your purpose? So we're going to talk about the ways we lie. This is that essay that you read by Erickson last week. So in an essay, right from the beginning, you want to signal what's coming. And this is just a quick reminder that you need a really good focused title. At a minimum, it needs to introduce your subject matter. What else will a good title do? It often hints at the thesis, it hints at the purpose, and ideally, it should try to engage the reader. Your introduction is to do that as well. So when we look at the ways we lie, think about that title. Right off the start, we know that this is an essay that's going to be about lying. We also know that this is something about the ways we lie. So we already have certain expectations that in this essay, we're going to get different types or different categories. In other words, we know right from the start that this is going to be a classification and division essay. When we also look at Erickson's essay, you're going to notice that her introduction is multiple paragraphs long. You don't want to just jump in with your divisions. You've got to let your reader know, why am I taking this large topic, whether it's about lying or like in Lutz's essay that you also read last week, which it was about doublespeak, also a kind of lying. Again, you want to give it enough context so that these subdivisions are meaningful. Okay, so let's look at Erickson's introduction here. Her strategy is to try and engage her reader early on and make it clear that this is not an essay where she is lecturing the reader. So she begins, the bank called today and I told them. And she talks about the kinds of lies that she has told already in a single day. So what she's using is personal examples. And she's very careful about those examples that she uses because they're examples that she expects her audience can relate to. So my guess is we have all told a similar kind of lie, whether it's the checks in the mail, or I thought I already paid that, or the most common is probably, hey, do I look good in this outfit? And sometimes we lie and say, oh yeah, you look great, or no, you don't look tired. I would never know you were sick. And so these are those lies that we often tell. And so this is her way of engaging us to see that maybe we have something in common with her. It's only after she has established this kind of rapport or relationship with us as a reader that she comes out with that we lie, we all do. But at this point, we're kind of already acknowledging that with her because we've been nodding our head in the first paragraph or so and like, oh yeah, I've done this before. But then she asks a really interesting rhetorical question in the third paragraph here. She says, sure, I lie, but it doesn't hurt anything, or does it? So this is the question that her paper is going to answer. Her thesis has to answer that question. And she does that just 2 paragraphs later. She says, I cannot seem to escape the voice deep inside me that tells me when someone lies, someone loses. And so that becomes her thesis, that there is no sort of harmless lie. The other thing she does in her introduction is she gives us a definition, because if she's going to take this topic, the subject matter of lies, she wants to make sure that she and her audience are on the same page, that we are defining a lie in similar ways. And so she says, a lie is a false statement or action, especially made with the intent to deceive. And I think that's important because she's letting us know we're not going to just be looking at verbal lies. And then the second definition, anything that gives or is meant to give a false impression. And so this has something to do with intent. And then I want to point you just to the last line here. She says a definition like this implies that there are many, many ways to tell a lie. Here are just a few. This little sentence, here are just a few. We often find this kind of sentence in a classification and division essay. If you can recall Lutz's essay, the one about doublespeak, he has a sentence that's very similar to this, and this is common. This is signaling to your reader, okay, pay attention. The rest of this essay, I am going to give you some of those ways. I'm going to use classification and division as my structuring device. Okay. So next we want to talk about the use of headings, and this is something I really want to see you use in the classification and division essay that you are currently writing. So for each division, you want to include a heading, and there is no firm and fast rule about how you have to design these headings. So you could decide to bold them all. You could decide that you want to maybe put them in all cap, maybe you want to underline them. That's really up to you. I think the general rule is you want to make sure that it's consistent, that you are formatting them all equally the same. Now remember that for this assignment, I have asked that you have a minimum of 4 divisions. And you want to give each division sort of equal treatment. So if you have one division that is roughly, say, 350 words, then every division should be roughly that length. Now, I don't want you to go through and do word counting and make sure that they are identical, but you should feel as if each division is balanced. And within each one of those divisions, you need to make sure that you're defining the content in that division. You want to make sure that you are including lots of evidence and examples to support it. And you also want to make sure that every single division goes back and supports the thesis, the main idea. And so when we look at Erickson's essay about lying, you're going to see that I have put at the top of the page her thesis in red. She does not do that. But I want to make sure that every one of these slides that you can see, aha, that division, it supports the thesis. Okay, so let's take a look here. So this is her first division, and I haven't reproduced every division in this PowerPoint, just a couple key ones. But this is her first one, the white lie. And in red, you can see there's that thesis. When someone lies, someone loses. And we especially see this in her second paragraph. She uses here a general example. It's not about a specific sergeant or a specific soldier who's been killed. Instead, it's sort of a composite. We know from history that this kind of lying about what has happened, it's been fairly common. So this is a general example. It's a composite. And so this is the example again about the sergeant who lies to the family of the soldier. He feels really bad that this family is going to struggle financially without the work pay that this man would have had. And so he lies and says the soldier, is just missing. But we find out in that last sentence, though, that lie has consequences that sergeant did not intend. Yet for 20 years, his family kept their hopes alive, unable to move on to a new life. And so that definitely supports that thesis. When someone lies, someone loses. That family lost the ability to move on with their lives, to mourn and then move forward. Here's another one of those divisions, ignoring the plain facts. And so this is one not so much about a verbal lie, but the sort of failure to speak up. Remember that lying is both verbal and action. And this one, which she's using, is a typical example. So she's taking something right out of the newspaper. This was a pretty big news story when it broke, that we have this individual, Father James Porter, and he was sexually abusing children. It turns out to be quite a lot of them. And the Catholic Church knew, and they just kind of moved him around from one parish to the other. And so again, when someone lies or when someone does not speak up and tell the truth, here we have an example of really serious consequences. More and more children were abused. And Erickson ties this back to that dictionary definition that sometimes actions or failure to speak up, it fits that definition of what a lie is. Here's another one. This is one of her divisions, deflecting. And so if we look at in the second paragraph here, I really want to focus on her use of examples. We've seen she's used personal examples, the kind of lies that she's told. She's used general examples. We just saw the typical example. Here's another typical example. Clarence Thomas was a Supreme Court judge, still is, and he was accused of sexual harassing one of his employees, Anita Hill. And so this really made the news when it came out. And the trials, they were on TV. And his sort of strategy or his defense was not to really address the issue of whether or not he was harassing her or not, but instead he claimed, look, the only reason why you've gone after him is because of racism. He said, I am the successful, smart black male, and so you're trying to take me down. And so what he does is he kind of deflects the real charges, and he doesn't have to deal with them. He decides that he'll deflect instead. Probably an example of deflection you might be used to is the general example that often when there is a rape case, part of the defense will be like, oh, well, she was drinking, or she had on this really, really short skirt or something like that. And again, it kind of victim blames, or it deflects the attention onto someone else's behavior rather than one's own. Now, the thing I want to talk about for this particular slide is typical examples are only effective when they actually strike a chord to the reader. So if you weren't familiar with the case of Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill, this example probably fell flat. And in that case, it wouldn't be effective. Now, because Erickson was writing this essay, a while ago, chances are her audience would have been familiar with it. But if you're writing for an audience today, you want to ask yourself, can I think of an example, or can I locate a current example that I think will be more meaningful to my reader? Because examples, they're only effective if your reader can identify with them or make a connection to that. So just keep that in mind. It always goes back to audience. Who are you writing for? All right, once you have your divisions, you have to ask yourself, how are you going to organize? How are you going to present them? Erickson's essay goes from the little white lie, the one that's the most common, the one that we find sort of the least harmful, or we assume that the little white lie is the least harmful. And then she moves out to more sort of institutional kind of lies. So she goes from the personal lie to ones that happen elsewhere in our sort of social and political sphere, or the ones we're least familiar with. Think about if you're doing research on, say, your uncle has just been diagnosed with colon cancer. So you get onto, WebMD or some website. You're going to notice that often there's sort of categories. So when we talk about cancer, there might be something like stage 1 cancer, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, terminal cancer. And so in that case, it's arranged chronological. Same thing when you think about that restaurant menu. Normally begins with appetizers, and at the back of the menu, we normally get the desserts. So it's arranged chronologically in the order that we would most often eat these foods. Okay, so when you are organizing your divisions, you want to think to yourself logically, how is it best to organize this material? Okay. So let's talk about conclusion. So you've got your divisions, you've got lots of examples, you've woven in your research. How do you bring all of these separate divisions into some kind of cohesive whole? You certainly want to make sure that you restate the thesis, right? And that's true for all essays or all papers that you're going to do. You want to make sure that your purpose is clear. And so this connects back to the audience again. Ask yourself, why does your audience need the information that you're providing? So let's think about Erickson's essay. Her thesis is that, look, when someone lies, someone gets hurt. It's as simple as that. There are consequences to everything that we say. And so why does she want us to know this? Right? I mean, it's got to be more than just, oh, here's some information. What does she want us to do with that information? So let's take a look. So here's our thesis here, right? No matter how pious we may try to be, we will still embellish, hedge, and omit to lubricate the daily machinery of living. So she again acknowledges that her purpose is not to kind of, shake her finger at us and lecture us and say, look, you got to stop lying. Lying's bad. It's not that simple. So she begins by saying, okay, I get it. That's not really the purpose, is not to tell us stop lying. But then she says there's a world of difference between telling functional lies and living a lie. And then she quotes from Martin Buber. The lie is the spirit committing treason against itself. Our acceptance of lies becomes a cultural cancer that eventually shrouds and reorders reality until moral garbage becomes as invisible to us as water to a fish. And I love that analogy. So think about this in other realms where we have the same attitude. Many of us have either said or heard things like, well, all politicians are corrupt, or all politicians are liars, or something like that. Sometimes we write off an entire class of people, So especially when we stumble into stereotypes and cliches, another division that she had included in her essay. And so she said there's something really dangerous when we resort to just kind of, oh, well, we all lie. And so this is hinting at some of her purpose, that we need to at least be conscious of the lies around us, the lies that we tell, but also the way people are trying to shape the world we live in, or our perceptions of what's real or not real. And so I think that becomes her purpose is, look, Let's think about the lies around us. Let's think about the harm they can do. Let's start small. And so she manages to wrap her essay up by going back to herself, going back to a personal example. And she says, well, look, let me start with me. Maybe I can at least try to lie less. And if I do, then maybe I'm less willing to let people lie to me. And so this gives us the purpose. Okay, so where do you go from here? So in Blackboard, I have uploaded the online activity for this week, and it's due by the end of the day on Tuesday. So you do want to get a jump start on that. It's meant to help you write this particular paper. And so it's going to ask you to identify your topic, to identify your thesis, to identify your audience. Who are you trying to talk to? Who do you think needs the information that you're providing? What is your purpose? Why do they need that information? And then to outline at least 4 divisions. You certainly can have more than that, but that's the minimum. That's what I'm looking for in this paper. And then to also identify what sources you have found that you think that you're going to be using in your essay, because remember, you have to have 2 scholarly critical sources. I do hope that you will try to find peer-reviewed journal articles through the library databases. Remember, in Module 4, there are a couple of videos that walk you through that. Or you might decide you can find some really good information online. That's possible. But again, just a reminder that you want to make sure that anything you get off of a website, that it really is college level, that it's not just providing sort of brief summary or bulleted items. Something with a little bit more depth to it would be helpful. All right, as always, if you have questions, send me an email, and good luck writing these essays. All righty.